couple questions. What is this for? What is this for? Anybody?
That's to help you navigate.
Help me navigate. Yeah, it does. If you're a blind person or you don't see very well, this helps you navigate, like, not trip over the steps and things like that. But it does something else. What else?
Fencing, I guess. Yeah, you could, like, for fencing, like sword fighter.
No, but it tells other people that you don't see so well. So if you're riding a bicycle, you would not run into me, hopefully, or you would. And if you know the person doesn't see much, and you want to become friends, then you always tell them your name until you know them, very well. Now, what is this thing for? No guess? It's for a maybe third grader who's blind, for a young person. And when children become blind or don't see very well, they anymore go to regular schools, and you may well have someday in your class or in your neighborhood. If you see a young person using a cane like this, do you feel sorry for them? No? You should not feel sorry for them, because they are learning to be independent in their own lives. And it's a lot of times people feel sorry and pity for people like that, but it just focuses on them. They want to be as normal and ordinary as you are. And if people just focus on what they think is wrong with them, it doesn't help them feel good about life. So anyway, bear in mind, if you get to know someone like this, they're just as ordinary as you are. They just see the world differently. Anyway, would anyone like to have this one? No? Then I'll save it for next year. Okay, thank you all.
Hello, everybody. The art of the error. I fear mistakes. And that fear is not usually related to actually harming myself or anyone else or anything big like that. I fear making a mistake that makes me look foolish or unkind. Singing out of tune, forgetting lyrics, hurting someone's feelings, forgetting to zip up, going to school in pajamas. I never did that, but I've had nightmares about it. So this morning I want to focus on a small aspect of mistake making that isn't about big risk, but the smaller risk of making a mistake by being a little bold or taking a chance. In elementary school, we had a traveling art teacher, and she would come to the cafeteria every 2 weeks, and all the classes would gather for a lesson in representational crayon art. One day we were learning to draw faces, and I was really into it, but I'm colorblind, and the face that I drew was purple. I used just a purple crayon, and the art teacher came around, and she looked at my work, and she said, I like that. It's awful, but I like it. And that was a life-changing sentence for me. I'm serious. I even as a kid, I went, wait a minute, I made a big mistake, and even then I knew that the mistake made the work more compelling. In the 70s, some friends and I went to a jazz camp, and I knew we'd be playing in front of each other, and I was talking to one of my teachers, Scott Morris, and who was going to be there also. And he said, I can't wait to make as many mistakes as I can. And that was just like another, what? That was another life-changing sentence. Because in my world, I wanted to be careful or you'll look bad. That was my idea. Just be careful. And in his world, mistakes will make you better, and they're an avenue of discovery. That was quite a life lesson. There's a famous story about trumpeter Miles Davis. Two of his band members were in a rehearsal studio getting ready for an upcoming concert and working on some real cool stuff they could do together. They'd be real, and then they could work out all the details. And Miles walked in and said, "Hey, stop it. I pay you to rehearse on the gig." Meaning, he didn't want slick, impressive, prefigured stuff. He wanted them to use their listening and their attentiveness and their presence to take some risks and come up with and turn them into art, even if they were mistakes first. Another personal example comes from being in a writing group here at UUFRC. And Anne Lamott has a book of wisdom on creativity called Bird by Bird. And there's a chapter, I was going to change this word, but now that the kids aren't here, I can say. There's a chapter called Shitty First Drafts. Not how to get it right the first time, but how to get all the wrongness out. And another shocking idea that opened a door to writing with less fear. The relationship of fear to mistakes is very close for me. I fear, then I make a mistake, then the mistake validates the fear, and the fear increases. So I work on practicing lowering the fear and feeling more accepting of mistakes. As a musician, when I finally could laugh when I did something dumb, it was a breakthrough. And one last Anne Lamott comment. I went to a class she taught, and during Q&A, a woman stood up and said, "I finished the novel. What can I do to ensure that I'm successful like you are?" And Lamott said, "I'm not going to talk about that. I don't know the answer to that, and besides, I don't want all of you to think of writing as a path to fame and fortune. The blessing isn't being a good writer. The blessing is having the desire to write." Wow. When I focus on being blessed with desire rather than am I good enough, a huge door opens that releases me from worrying about mistakes. Finally, I want to talk about all of you. Something I think about a lot that you might know and you might consider. When I came to UU, I didn't write, I didn't play drums anymore, and I didn't sing. But when you stand up here and you look out, you see a sea of support. Not eager critics, not competitors, not scorekeepers or mistake counters, but people who are happy to see you try, mistakes and all. Thank you.
Mistakes are things that we can do, but also things that can happen to us. As I mentioned, I got engaged the week before last. It's a big deal and a joyful one for us both. At this point in my life, though, I have to admit that I have been engaged twice before, married once. It would be exceedingly unromantic to tell my loved one that she's my third choice. Try three. That's not how it seems, though, right? I mean, for me, at least now, it feels like it was meant to be in a romantic sense and in a spiritual sense. We have this feeling of that. As human beings, we search for meaning in everything. But I have to think with mistakes, does that mean that everything was meant to be? Were my previous engagements meant to be? I especially have trouble telling people who have experienced loss, experienced disability, that whatever they had was meant to be. But these things, and I don't have an answer for that, right? Some things might be accidents, might be mistakes, maybe they're good. I think those previous engagements were meant to be. I have a belief in a greater power and a meaning to the universe, but I don't see it all as a plan imposed on me. We heard before of what if God was one of us? Maybe he doesn't have or she doesn't have a plan for everything, but is going through it like the rest of us. And I feel like there are things that are meant to happen, and I can be thankful for my life as a whole and accept both the good and the bad with positivity. And I don't have answers about how to resolve these two of meaning or accident, but I can be thankful for life as a whole, and especially this community, regardless.
When I first started coming to this congregation about 5 years ago, I always heard this song about "Come, come, whoever you are," and I knew it was a translation of a 13th century poem by Rumi, the Persian poet. And I kept hearing the phrase "lovers of meaning," and I kept wondering all these years what that was about, lovers of meaning. But then last week, Hanju corrected me, it's not lovers of meaning, it's lovers of leaving. And I still don't know what that means either. But anyway, I have given a lot of thought to that word meaning because it's such an important part of our lives in communication. And it's a very, very, very complicated word. I found out that there are 10 pages in the Oxford English Dictionary about the word meaning and meaning and how it's evolved over 800 years. And most of the time it was a negative word, a mean person, a mean-spirited thing, a mean storm. Only in recent years has it evolved to have some of the positive meanings that when we say it means a lot to me or it was a meaningful thing, that's only a recent evolution of the use of that word meaning. And philosophers and social psychologists and others have made it even more complicated by analyzing the way it evolves in a person's life or in the communication between two people. Basically, a symbol has no inherent meaning. People learn the use of a symbol. To give a simple example, I never understand why Reverend Brian throws stones into this bowl. No, I don't. I thought about it every week, and I'm sure there is some ancient meaning from early days of Unitarianism, or even from ancient Zoroastrianism, or maybe he just made it up from Austin when he came up here. I don't. But I'd like to know, and I'm sure he'll educate me in the near future. But it just, I wonder about things like that. What does it communicate to me that I don't know? That I'd like to know. And the meaning of I was going to tell you some jokes about the meaning of life, but I was advised not to by my children. So I'm going to move on to relate this to change and troubles in life. One of the interesting books that I've read about this kind of issue is by a Unitarian. I think he's not retired now at a college in Florida named Carl Peters, and he argued that change is inherent in all of life, that there would have been no evolution from the earliest molecules to Cro-Magnon people and us if there had not been the continual changes that if genes always replicated themselves, there would be no humanity. There would be no change. That change is built into the very moment of life, and it's built into every moment of each of our lives, because every heartbeat, every breath we take, pushes us into a new moment of the future. And who knows what it will hold, but it's made up of all of the molecules that made up the original universe, and the way our minds have evolved, that we can, consider what's happening in our own lives now. To give some examples of the influence of genetics on our life, consider Martha Beasley. She's only 5 feet tall, and she can't help it. I got her permission to say this, so. But she's had a very good life as an educator and family, and despite Tom, she's done very well for herself. So, some genetics, many genetic changes are adaptive. They make life more interesting or more complicated or more advanced, but some things aren't. And I stand before you as an example of another negative genetic change. I came from the shallow end of the West Virginia gene pool. I grew up in rural West Virginia in the early years, and I got 3 genes from my mother that, when I was 17 years old, started a process of visual decline. And it's called Leber's hereditary optical neuropathy. It's a deterioration of the optic nerve, and they don't know why the genes start expressing themselves at any certain age. It's the interaction of your genes and your environment and all the things, hormones and everything else. But anyway, it started when I was 17, and it's gradually progressed. But when it first happened, people felt sorry for me. It's a pity that this young man has this loss of vision now. And I even felt sorry for myself, for a few months. But then several things began to happen to me that made quite a bit of difference. First of all, my parents took me to the rehabilitation place in West Virginia, and they gave me a few tests and said maybe education might be a way for future employment. And so they paid most of the way for me to go to college. And I went to West Virginia University in Morgantown, and I had some wonderful professors and I learned to think critically about the nature of what I know and what anyone knows, and how to evaluate it, how intelligence plays a part of human life. And it started me, I simply came to the conclusion that I would have a lot better prospects for employment if I did well in college. And so I continued to get a lot of education. But while in Morgantown, I met a 19-year-old girl named Joanne, and that was a good thing. And now we have 3 children and six grandchildren, excuse me. And so, was it a bad thing to have these bad genes? In my dotage, I get, excuse me. Anyway, you can make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and at the time, the things seemed bad, but in the course of a person's life, the meaning of the event, changed completely. That's true for any kind of troubles we have, whether it be genetic or whether it's caused by accidents or environmental things or anything that can make your life miserable. And the question becomes, when we encounter these kind of blockages, do they bog us down in sadness and depression and self-pity, or do we have the ability to look at ourselves and consider alternatives and have the possibility of what we feel as freedom, that when you encounter a problem, a blockage, you can consider all the choices available to you at the time and weigh them and consider them and pick the one that would seem to lead to the best the most future improvement in your life situations. And you do that knowing you're doing it with other people. Like the genetics were part of my life, but all the people along the way are even more important part of my life or your lives. So it's a community, and as you make those choices, you improve your own life, and you can become your own best friend by experiencing the pleasure and fun of making choices that give you more freedom and more possibilities. And as you do it for yourself, you are better able to share it with other people. So when you're your own best friend, we have the possibility of better helping other people and maybe better preserving the world we live in. Amen. Thank you.